Hello, how are you? I'm Matthew, host of Truth from the Booth from the beautiful port city of Halifax, Nova Scotia. This Easter Sunday, we travel south of the border to the great United States of America, a tariff-free conversation with Nick Mulae, Paranormal Investigator in Illinois. We discuss Illinois weather, Nick's mental wellness, his thoughts on RFK Jr.'s recent remarks about autism. Nick was diagnosed at the age of 3. We chat a bit about paracons and the importance of going to them and what happens when you don't. FOMO is real. I've known Nick since 2019, and he is a great storyteller. Truly frightening paranormal tales. But not this show. We finished the chat talking about the deadly dust storms in the mid-1930s. So let's get into it. Nick and I spoke on the phone Friday evening. Now the weather here in Nova Scotia, it feels like it's on the upswing. Does it still feel like winter in your neck of the woods, Nick?
No, as a matter of fact, it's actually been quite warm today. It did rain just a little bit, although, it's just been overcast. The sun has shined a little bit, but it's been like in the 70s today. Unfortunately, however, though, there are talks that later tonight around 10 or 11 o'clock, we're supposed to get some pretty bad storms, but I still don't know the circumstances or details. It's kind of up in the air right now. So I guess this is going to be kind of one of those weather events that only time will tell what will happen in a few hours.
Okay, and we're going to talk about the weather here a bit later in the show, but I want to talk about your mental wellness. I like to ask all of my guests when we start the broadcast before we get into any type of lengthy conversation, what's your mental health like on a scale of 1 to 10, Nick?
I would definitely give it, a good 9 or even 10, as far as I'm concerned, because of so many of the accomplishments that I made through such difficult times for myself with, as a person myself who's been diagnosed with autism, I've been able to make a lot more successes these last few years during when times are tough for me, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And people should know, and maybe they're not aware, but April is Autism Awareness Month. And I want to reference a post that you put up on your own social media on your Facebook page on Thursday. And I'm quoting, "Autism is not a disease." What made you say that? And I want to point out you got a lot of feedback, a lot of supportive feedback from your friends. What made you say that in that moment, Nick?
It was the result of a speech that happened just the evening before. Now, I didn't actually watch the speech. It was only after when people were talking about it on Facebook, and I decided to kind of delve into it myself and looked it up online. It was involving, this, not to get too political, this guy named Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who actually is the son of Robert F. Kennedy and nephew of President John F. Kennedy, who was going around, saying that there's been such an increase with people who've been diagnosed with autism, both at birth and also those who had recently been diagnosed with it, that he's considering it as a disease. It's been on the rise, and that it's reaching an epidemic level almost equal to that of COVID. And when I heard about that, I just almost lost my mind at that point. I thought, you know what, as someone with autism, who was born with it myself, because I was diagnosed with it when I was only 3. So, and after everything I've had to endure all these years, which, as successful as I am now, I still deal with challenges and problems to this very day. So I thought to myself, I got to say something about this, because the whole speech for the most part was despicable and just offensive, because that obviously was a prejudiced message that he was giving out, and also saying things like that autism was tearing families apart and whatnot. I mean, I could go on all day about with what he was talking about. It just disgusted me. So that's what motivated me to write this entire message and let everyone know that it's not a disease, it's a mental condition. And it may be true there, that autism is, increasing within the population, but that's just because you have, some kind of mental disability, that doesn't mean it's a disease in any way, shape, or form at all.
I was really happy, and I wasn't surprised to see the feedback that you did get with that post.
Yeah, I was really surprised myself. And it was not only just, these were coming from a lot of my paranormal friends, but obviously this wasn't even meant to be paranormal. They were still supporting me 100%. And even more amazingly, like it has been so many times, these messages and comments that were coming in, these were coming from people literally all over the world that were supporting me. So it's quite obvious that, as April being Autism Awareness Month, it is true. That's the other thing. Some people fail to. They only have been saying that there's been an increase, in autism, here in the United States. Well, that's not the case at all, because I've spoken to other investigators, who either know someone who has autism or has a family member who does, in these other countries. So, this whole entire increase in autism isn't just something that's happening just in the United States. It's a phenomenon that's happening worldwide. And I think it's definitely something that, I don't know if autism awareness spreads to other countries, but I definitely would think that other countries should adopt it. But more importantly than anything else, I'm very thankful for the support that I've gotten from these people from other countries.
Oh, absolutely. And I know, having known you for a few years, you really don't like to be political on your post. You like to stick to the paranormal investigations and your paranormal brothers and sisters, but obviously this is something that you felt you needed to speak out on. You did. Good on you. Let's keep with your paranormal brothers and sisters and social media, because on one end, here we are talking about this post that you put out there. You get all this feedback, which was wonderful, and then on the other end of it, when there are paracons like the one in Texas, where you just can't get to for whatever reason, and you cannot see those individuals, you're on the other end where you have to be away from social media. Why is that?
So when a paracon, occurs that I'm unable to attend to, it's kind of personal to me, because when I go to these paracons, well, not just the paracons, same with investigations themselves, because when I go to these paracons and investigations, I'm basically living my true identity. I may have I do have, of course, a working job that I work almost every day. But I think, like a lot of us, obviously, we don't always enjoy the job that we have. And obviously, I would say the same for my job. But I don't, it's obviously we work because that's what gives me the money, so I can go to these things. So when I have the opportunity to go to these paracons, in other words, like, if I was to die by tomorrow, I want to be remembered as the guy who investigated, who came out to as many paracons, gave us support, hang out, have as much fun with all these other investigators as possible. That's what I want to be remembered for, not for working at this grocery store that has some not so great managers. So, but in this case though, with the paracons, when I'm unable to go, like I said, it's personal to me, because knowing that I'm unable to make it and knowing how much excitement and fun I'm going to miss, it's heartbreaking to me. So I'd rather stay off social media for a few days, just so I don't see any pictures or videos or even podcasts that are filmed at some of these. Believe it or not, some of these podcasts do take place at the paracons. I try to avoid all forms of that, because just by seeing that more and just having, everyone saying, oh, we're going to have a great time, and people writing about it too, it's just too upsetting for me then, because then it's like, it makes me even more upset, because I'm thinking to myself, man, I am really missing a hell of an event this weekend or right now or whatever. So I just tend to disappear for a few days before I eventually come back.
Okay. When was the last time you had the opportunity to go out to one of these events?
So the last one that I went to was, I don't remember the actual name of the paracon for whatever reason, but I do know it was up in southern Wisconsin. It was only like about an hour and a half away from where I live, because I live close to the Illinois-Wisconsin border. So, and I do remember it was in November. It was probably about a week or two after Halloween was, I would say probably about a week or so after Halloween ended. And, obviously just a week or two before I had my hospital visitation. So we went up there. It wasn't that big of a paracon compared to many others, but it was still, the way how they ran the event and how it was all put together. To me, that was probably the most perfect Paracon to have to celebrate, to really have, as the final Paracon for the end of the year, which that's how I always focus on the Paracon season. It usually starts anywhere from like late March or early April, and it goes all the way to like early to mid-November. And then after that, we're on when the winter season arrives, we're pretty much on break then, so we can rebuild our money and try to get back into it. And, once the spring arrives, we could do it all over again. But this one, though, really, marked the end of a good season from last year.
You mentioned weather, and I just want to switch gears real quick, and I want to talk about the weather because here I am in Halifax, Nova Scotia, the Atlantic coast of Canada. We know I've seen the weather drastically change over the years. Wildfires, hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, volcanoes, everything seems to be on the uptick. And within the last month, there was a real bad stretch of extreme weather that rolled through Tennessee, West Virginia, North Carolina. And I know you have paranormal brothers and sisters in those areas. Did they share any stories with you about what they were going through?
They never really shared very many stories with me, although if they posted it on social media, particularly Facebook. But I did, however, send a message out to, because I can only reach out to so many people, especially when you have a lot of investigators that live in these particular states, which is why sometimes I write these messages on Facebook itself to let everyone know that I'm thinking about them. I'm keeping them in my thoughts and prayers, and most importantly, let us know that you guys, made it safely. Thank goodness for one thing, because I know Facebook's kind of more or less on its way now, because just the way how things have been going on that site. I will say one positive thing about it is that I'm sure glad they have that notification where you can get notified when after there's been a life-threatening situation where people can mark themselves safe, from, whether it's a natural disaster or whatever. So when I get those notifications hearing that they're marked safe, it does feel comforting, but at the same time, I still will check in with them anyway, just to make sure that, they're completely safe, 100%.
Okay. The bad weather that they have experienced, I've seen videos that you have put out. Would you call yourself a storm chaser, Nick, in any way?
I wouldn't necessarily call myself a storm chaser, or at least not yet, because...
Not yet.
I mean, I've done a few chases, not intentionally to find storms, mainly like if I've been coming on my way or coming back from a road trip or something like that, and we cross paths with the storm. That's the closest I've done so far. But I would call myself more of both a weather photographer, because I do take a lot of interesting pictures of clouds in the sky whenever something looks rather unusual up in the skies above us, and I would call myself more of a storm filmmaker for now, but that could change as time eventually goes on, because I actually do have a few friends of mine that are interested in wanting to go storm chasing, but because I've done more studying than they have, we think it's probably, I have a whole collection of like different weather videos. Like, got like 40 or, I'm not even joking, I got probably about 40 or 50 of these. Many of them are like on VHS tapes, and a lot of them were made back in the late 1980s, particularly the 90s and some early 2000s, which are hard to get in this day and age. Many of them never got transferred to DVD, so might be able to find a few on YouTube, but not very many. They're just hard to find documentaries, but the ones that I have do provide a lot of interesting information and education when it comes to storm chasing. So what I'm hoping, what we're going to do as we continue entering the spring and into the summer, we're going to be watching a lot of these videos, because it's been quite a couple of years since I've seen them myself. So I kind of have to refresh my memory, get the education, know what we need to do. And of course, just like anything else, the first priority more than anything else is safety. If we choose to do this kind of stuff, we just got to have the education and train training, so we know what we're doing if we go out to the field and try to chase storms.
Oh, absolutely, yes. You want to have some ankle weights on as well, just in case it gets windy. I want to know. Can you answer me this question here? Can weather disrupt a spirit's activity? And what I mean, if there is a spirit or several spirits in an actual structure, and that structure is destroyed, whether it's a wildfire or whatever natural disaster, what happens to those spirits? Do they remain? Do they go dormant? What happens?
So contrary to popular belief, because everybody always thinks that when a haunted location is destroyed, it releases the spirits. And while that may be true to some varying degree, depending on the location, that's not always the case, because some of these spirits will still remain even after when the building is destroyed and long gone, because the building may be gone, but from where the spirits remain and like what may have happened to them in their lives when they were alive, that's always going to remain for as long as it takes. And I remember a while back we were talking about something called a looper, where you have looper spirits out there, which are spirits that you cannot communicate with. It's just basically like a vision and repeat from a historical moment. So there's still ghosts, but you cannot communicate with them.
Okay.
So I'm actually just I actually wanted to throw a quick example of a location like that that's been destroyed but still haunted. There is a location called Summerwind Mansion that is located up in northern Wisconsin, and it was quite a historic house. It was originally built in 1916, and right from the start, after it was, even again, contrary to popular belief, some people believe these locations only get haunted after many years of standing. It's not always the case, too. Sometimes they can become haunted immediately, after they were built, if there was some other type of historical event that occurred prior to a building's construction. So Summerwind was one of those locations. It was extremely haunted throughout most of the century. However, by the late 1970s and early 80s, it became abandoned, but it still was a popular area, for ghost hunters and paranormal investigators to check out. That all, however, somewhat came to an end in 1988 when Summerwind Mansion was struck by lightning multiple times, and the entire structure burned to the ground. Today, all that's left is just like a few parts of the chimneys, because those were made out of stone. Part of the foundation is there, and that's pretty much it. But once again, the building may be gone, but according to those who visited the now deserted area, there's still reports of paranormal activity where Summerwind once stood. So it's still going on to this very day.
The lightning strikes, was that in the same storm?
Yeah, it was from the same storm.
That's a message. That's a message being sent.
Yeah, it was during a severe storm that happened during the summer of 1988. And now Summerwind, I think the reason why it was struck by lightning too is Summerwind was also kind of up on a hill.
Okay.
So sometimes when you have structures up on hills and mountains, unfortunately, that does become target for lightning strikes, and depending on how high they are. So in this case with Summerwind, I'm not entirely sure how high it was placed up on the hillsides, but it made it an easy target. But by then, like I said, nobody was living in the mansion at this point. It had been abandoned ever since, but it was struck multiple times, caught on fire, and because most of the structure was made out of wood, that's what caused most of it to burn to the ground, except it was two chimneys in the foundation, which are made out of stone. Those are the only portions of Summerwind that remain today.
Okay, so we have spirits that can exist in high elevation. What about underwater spirits? If underwater divers or anyone was to go visit a submerged shipwreck submarine, what are the possibilities of seeing spirits down there? Is that a thing, Nick?
It's actually a really interesting question, because I've often kind of wondered that myself. Like when we look at locations like, let's say, the sinking, like where the sinking of the Titanic occurred. Or ironically enough, I know this is a little bit further out from the east coast of Canada. You guys have what's known as the graveyard of the Atlantic, where you've had many ships, over decades that have sank. And there's also, a Pacific counterpart, one too, for the Pacific Ocean, ironically called the Graveyard of the Pacific. So when you have a lot of these ships that are further down, that's something I've been kind of wondering too, thinking, is it possible that even though, some of these people may have drowned when these ships sank, and there probably were some that everyone managed to survive, that managed to get off just in time, I do wonder if there could be some type of spiritual activity that occur within the water. Because once again, there's also, again, it's true to some degree, but I would say, I guess it depends on who you talk to. There's been this, ongoing story that, legends say that spirits cannot cross running water. And it's hard for me to say if that's true or not. Like I said, I guess that depends on who you talk to in that case, but that's a very interesting question, though.
Well, the reason I ask, when you mentioned the sinking of the Titanic, a lot of those individuals, a lot of those bodies were brought here to Halifax, and the location that they were brought to is said to be haunted, which is why I ask if we have spirits that are in a property in Halifax, there has to be some that have been left behind. I don't know. I think it's interesting. I might have to do some more research, and you will probably have to do some more research as well.
It's very possible. Definitely very possible.
Okay, there's a few more things I want to talk about, but first we're going to take a break. Do you have time to hang out for a few more moments?
Sure thing.
Okay, we are speaking with Nick Mulae, paranormal investigator, joining us this weekend from Glenview, Illinois. My name is Matthew. You are listening to Truth from the Booth on Folked Up Radio. We'll be right back after this. Halifax, Nova Scotia, home of talk radio, Truth from the Booth, an ongoing awareness campaign keeping Canada's housing crisis on the front burner and in the moment right here in the Halifax Regional Municipality, the Maritimes, and beyond. True, real-life stories told by those living it, existing in the streets. They bear all and provide you a brief glimpse into an unimaginable world of misery and disappointment, resilience, and triumph. Hear from those with boots on the ground advocating for change now. The stories of the unhoused need to be told by them to educate you, all of us. Hear all the conversations Sundays at 10 a.m. with a repeat at 6 p.m. here on folkedupradio.com. Now, back to today's fantastic guest.
Hi, I'm Nick Mulae, and I'm here chatting with Matt Grant on the show here, Truth from the Booth.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. Okay, just a few more things and I'll let you go. You are on social media a lot. You're always in front of the camera. You're doing different shows, different podcasts. You host your own thing. I'm just curious, and I know we really haven't talked a lot about the paranormal activity. Maybe we'll do that in a later show, but this is just an opportunity for people to get to know Nick Mulae. Outside of being a paranormal investigator, we learned lots dealing with autism since the age of 3, and just having lots of support from your brothers and sisters in the paranormal community. It's super important. So just tell me how many different platforms you're currently on, and if you can tell me about Rift Nation Network and the difference between them and the Things Network.
Well, currently, as far as platforms are concerned, or in this case, the podcasts, I would have to say, because I'm on a lot of them now, and I would definitely say at least a good, as hard as this is going to sound to believe, I'm almost on like a half dozen different podcasts. Now, fortunately, I don't do it like that every single week, because as you can imagine, it does get kind of tiring. And even though that's the official number, I still have at least a few other additional shows who want to have, who have been asking me of co-hosting one to have me on, or helping out if like a show, if that show if their co-host wasn't available, they try to reach out to me. And it's interesting too, because these are podcasts, once again, coming from all over the world, so it's quite an honor to have these investigators from different countries reaching out to me and asking me about wanting to be part of their show. And it's not for in any way, shape, or form like they're trying to look for an American show host or anything like that. They just want someone like me, because they know that I'm one of the most experienced, the most trained, and that I can really help them out when they need to, just for them to be on their show. That's all that matters. So that's what I love about these podcasts. So, but to answer your other question, so this other network that you brought up, the Rift Network, that is a network that I believe was created by a guy named Ed Odell. Sometimes he goes by the name of Howie too, but I usually just refer to him as Ed. And he lives all the way out in Virginia, and his podcast. Well, not only just his show, I would say his network is actually similar to our network, the Things Network. I don't know if there's too much differences compared to the, Things Network as far as the Rift Network goes. I haven't actually told Ed this yet, but I was actually considering about bringing one of my shows possibly onto the Rift Network if that is, if the slot is available. But Ed has been very supportive of our network and our shows. We've been kind of doing the same thing. So Ed, at one point, I guess I didn't get word about it till much later, but because we've been supporting each other and we started basically forming this brotherhood, if you will, I think that at one point, I think Ed and one of us basically said, hey, since we support each other, why don't we have both of our networks be sister networks, practically? We'd be among some of the few paranormal networks to basically work truly together as sister networks. So he's been referring to it ever since. So we've been, I would call almost more partner networks more than anything else.
Okay, well, good to know. Wonderful. One final thing, and one thing I know about you, you love to tell stories, and you are a great storyteller. You really know how to paint the visual. And I'm not going to get you to tell this story now, but for the audience, the story that you told on the Halloween show, which I think was probably the most frightened you've ever been. I don't want to hear that story. Maybe in a later show, but the story that I want you to end this program on is you're a great historian when it comes to different tragic events that have happened in the United States. Coming up on, I believe, the 90th anniversary of the deadly dust storms of April 1935. Can you, and this is something that you've put up on your own Facebook account, so can you tell us a little bit about these deadly dust storms?
Yes. So the dust storms, which, by the way, it not only just happened in 1935. In some areas of the Great Plains were affected. The full time it lasted was from 1930 all the way up till 1936, although some areas of the Great Plains experienced longer, some up until about 1940, 1941. So almost an entire decade. But that was a decade where, you had, and of course, it couldn't have came at a worser time because this was the same decade as when the Great Depression struck. So as bad as it was for farmers who were losing their homes or didn't have the best homes to live in, now you have all this intense, hot, dry, drought and these dust storms that follow on. But it was just a period of natural heat that really affected, the Great Plains of the United States. Primarily, it affected parts of southwestern Kansas, western Oklahoma, northern Texas, northeastern New Mexico, and southeastern Colorado. And it was just, and I think the worst thing was, like I said, was certainly the dust storms. But one of the worst to affect was, like I said, the 90th anniversary of this just occurred a few days ago. That was April 14th, 1935. And that was what later became known as Black Sunday. And this was a monstrous dust storm that, here's the thing too. I mean, when you look at pictures like that, obviously because it was the 30s, like anywhere else, photography was mainly in black and white. But when you watch documentaries of involving survivors who were interviewed, they would tell you very quickly how they were able to identify these dust storms, because of the color that they would have. So you can't see in the black and white pictures. So The dust storms before and after Black Sunday, they were able to identify where exactly they were from. As I recall, if it was red, they knew it was coming from Oklahoma. If it was gray, they knew it was coming from Texas. If it was yellow, they knew it was coming from New Mexico. If it was white, they knew it was coming from Colorado. If it was brown, they knew it was coming from Nebraska, or, in this case, from one survivor from their own land in Kansas. But when it came to Black Sunday, it was neither of any of those colors at all. It wasn't from any of those states. They knew that this was a type of dust that came from somewhere else, and where that originated from, believe it or not, because although it's primarily focused on the Great Plains, some of these dust storms were created further up and as far up to the southern portions of Canada. So it could have even been Canadian soil that could have came. And when you look at these giant dust storms, the locals and farmers often refer to them not only just as dust storms, but also as black blizzards, because they acted like blizzards, but it would have devastating effects to those areas. And for Black Sunday, one survivor once said that after that storm finally passed, unfortunately, there were a lot of people that were caught out in the open and didn't survive the storm.
Can you give us a visual? Like, what would these people be looking at? Like, what's the height? What's the depth of this? How fast is it moving? How long does it last? Can you answer any of those for us?
I can answer a few of them. So I can definitely give you a visual for that. Imagine if you were walking down a road one day, it's nice and sunny out. And that's the thing too. When it happened with Black Sunday, the weather prior to the storm was just perfect. Everybody thought the worst was finally over. It wasn't too hot. It was actually breezy and cool out. It was just a really nice day that people actually could get outside and enjoy it. But imagine if you're walking down the street and all of a sudden you hear this roar right behind you, and you turn around and all of a sudden you see this giant boiling black cloud that's coming directly towards you at like 50 or 60 miles an hour. So basically almost like the length, like the speed of a passing car coming right at you. And you hear this, people would first think, tornado, because some of these dust clouds definitely did look like tornadoes. And they sometimes did have that rotating kind of look. And most importantly, it was the Great Plains. So this was the same area where tornadoes are frequent at. But when you see that it is much bigger than a typical tornado or even a supercell thunderstorm, where, it's as high as you can see and as far, as high as you can see, that's several thousand feet up and several miles wide coming right at you, I think obviously that would pretty much scare the hell out of anyone.
Oh, you'd think it was the end times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a lot of survivors, and you'll see it in a lot of documentaries, you'll see it in a lot of books. I think it was even the Dust Bowl, which, it eventually became known of. That was the one event that later people came up with the name the Dust Bowl. That actually became the inspiration for the book The Grapes of Wrath. And I think even that book mentions it, but everybody said when these dust storms, particularly Black Sunday, arrived, they didn't know, not only didn't know what to think, they literally thought the world was coming to an end. You would hear it when you see these films and documentaries, they all say the same thing. They're like, they would say, survivors would say, we just remember standing out there watching, and we're just thinking, oh my God, this must be the end of the world. This is probably how the world comes, is ending. So, and it did have, when you look at the pictures, it does have a very apocalyptic look to it. And I think anybody would think that would be like, they would think that the world would be coming to an end that way.
Talking about Black Sunday on Easter Sunday with paranormal investigator Nick Mulae in Glenview, Illinois. Always appreciate the conversation, Nick. Let's have you back on the program sometime this summer.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to do so. So I always appreciate having me on. So thank you very much.
Hey, just remember one thing about your neighbors to the north. We are elbows up and over the boards, my friend.
Yes, yeah. I support you guys 100%.
Thanks, Nick. We'll talk later.
You have a great evening, and also you have a great Easter as well.
Thank you.
Take care.
Always a good conversation with Nick Mulae. My time with you is coming to a close, but my hope for you this weekend, you are surrounded by people who love you for who you are. It's simple. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and have a safe week ahead. For Truth from the Booth, I'm Matthew. Let's get you back to the best folk music in the country. 99.9 FM Perth Andover and folkedupradio.com.